Grand Duchess Maria was the second youngest daughter of the deposed Russian Emperor Nicholas II and his wife, the Empress Consort Alexandra. Like her younger sister, Grand Duchess Anastasia, who was 17 at the time of her death, 19-year-old Maria was also a teenager when the Russian Imperial family, the House of Romanov, were murdered at the hands of a firing squad on the 17th of July 1918. Following her death, at least 53 individuals either came forward or were supposedly identified as being the Grand Duchess. However, all of them were exposed as impostors, as the skeletal remains of the imperial family were recovered. In July 1991, the bodies of 5 family members were exhumed. After forensic examination and DNA identification, the bodies were laid to rest with state honors in the St. Catherine Chapel of the Peter and Paul Cathedral in St. Petersburg, where most other Russian monarchs since Peter the Great lie. In 2007, the last 2 missing bodies were discovered, finally putting the imperial family to rest. In this video, we will be exploring the tale of a mysterious woman from Spain, whose grandson remained convinced that she was the Grand Duchess, who lived a life of secrecy among refugees in the aftermath of the Spanish Civil War. This is the story of Maria Martí. It is not known whether Maria Martí declared her so-called regal origin herself, but investigations into Maria's origins were initiated by her grandson David Martí. The grandson, who relocated to Argentina, says that his mother Carmen, who is originally Spanish, grew up in an orphanage under the patronage of the Swiss Red Cross, where she was visited from time to time by a mysterious woman who introduced herself as Maria Martí. After the fall of the Spanish Republic in the aftermath of the Spanish Civil War in 1939, many Republican exiles sought refuge in France, including the Roussillon province on the border with Spain, which is part of the northern Catalonia region. But almost all of them were stopped and held in internment camps. Following the fall of Barcelona to the Nationalist Army on the 26th of January 1939, the French government had anticipated the flight of refugees from Spain and closed the border to entrance on the 26th and 27th of January. Large numbers of people waited near the border until France reopened it on the 28th of January to women, children, and elderly people only. Unarmed men and Republican military units were only permitted to enter France on the 5th of February. Despite having tens of thousands of police officers across a 93-mile-long section of the border, the French were poorly prepared for a large influx of refugees, with 140,000 refugees crossing into Spain in just 4 days. French authorities separated men of military age from women, children, and elderly and confiscated most of the possessions which the refugees carried with them, and families were separated during this process. Provision for food, sanitation, and shelter were woefully inadequate, and there, fenced off on the beach without any infrastructure, with the sand offering the only protection and without any sanitary measures, many of them suffered from malnutrition, disease, and other afflictions. Many pregnant women lost their unborn children or died in childbirth. Elizabeth Eidenbenz had arrived in Madrid during the Spanish Civil War on the 24th of April 1937. She was a volunteer as part of the Swiss aid team but had relocated to the south of France. Eidenbenz was a teacher, a nurse, and founder of the Mothers of Elna, who helped save some 600 children who were mostly the children of Spanish Republicans, Jewish refugees, and gypsies fleeing the German invasion of France. Elizabeth spoke both Spanish and Catalan, and appalled by the situation of mothers and children amongst the refugees, she decided to convert an abandoned mansion in Elna in France into a maternity home. The group initially relied on voluntary donations from Europe, but after the start of World War II, funds dried up while refugees began to arrive from France and the rest of Europe. These were mainly Jewish women fleeing the German occupation. Therefore, the group was forced to associate themselves with the Red Cross and to abide by the policy of neutrality. This would have prevented them from sheltering political refugees, mostly Jewish people. It was therefore decided that the identity of most of the refugees would be hidden in order to circumvent these laws. They were harassed by the Gestapo and on one occasion detained. Some 400 Spanish children and 200 Jewish children from Europe were saved throughout this period. According to David Martí, his mother Carmen was born in the maternity home in Elna on the 28th of March 1942, before being placed in an orphanage in Girona, Spain, in the month of November 1942, following the Spanish Civil War. Maria Martí, the supposed grandmother of David Martí, visited his mother Carmen while she was in the care of the orphanage in Girona, before she disappeared in 1956, leaving David and his mother Carmen with little to go on. Intrigued by this mystery, David Martí began his own investigation in the 1990s, contacting the police in Girona for any documentation relating to his grandmother. According to David, the Spanish police had a document on file from the year 1940, which had the word "can't" written at the bottom instead of a signature, and a date of birth which read the 21st of April 1928, and a place of birth which read Olot in Girona, Spain. If this information is correct, it suggests that Maria was a teenage mother who had not yet reached the age of majority by the early 1940s, which would explain both the lack of a signature on the aforementioned document as well as an explanation to why his mother Carmen was placed in an orphanage. However, as Eidenbenz had concealed the identity of the mothers in the maternity home as a means to evade the authorities in occupied France, David did not believe that the information provided in the document from 1940 was accurate. David would claim to have discovered a document dated from the 21st of April 1918, located in the civil registry of Carmen Martí in Elna, France, predating the date of birth on the aforementioned document held by the Spanish police. David also discovered that Maria Martí's last place of residence prior to her death in 1990 was a geriatric residential home in Girona, which he was familiar with, as his father's aunt, a nun, had resided at the same residential home, along with a number of other nuns from the city. David claimed that these nuns resided across the street from the orphanage in which his mother was placed, and this supposedly made him ask why the nuns did not inform them of Maria Martí's income or death, suspecting a cover-up. David questioned why he was overlooked by the Girona Provincial Council when both the residential home and the orphanage belonged to the council, along with the aforementioned documentation which was on file. As well as this, he was initially unsure of where exactly his grandmother was buried, as two separate documents listed two separate cemeteries. Adding to this the alleged silence of the nuns along with hospital files stating no known relatives, and David Martí reached his conclusion. His grandmother was none other than Grand Duchess Anastasia, whose identity was being concealed. Well, for a while, before he decided that Grand Duchess Maria, who would have been less than 3 months away from her 43rd birthday when his mother was born, was really his grandmother. David Martí offered no real explanation as to how Maria managed to escape captivity and flee Russia, apart from vague hints of a collusion between Soviet Russia and Germany. He also never explained exactly why she was in Republican Spain during the Civil War of all times and places, especially among the Republican exiles, or in the maternity home in France run by Elizabeth Eidenbenz during the German occupation. Given Grand Duchess Maria's connections and standing, both situations are extremely unlikely, even if her personal circumstances were unfavorable in exile. Nevertheless, David Martí's unfortunate grandmother would not be resting in peace, as he had her remains exhumed on the 23rd of April 2007 in a bid to prove her supposed royal identity. However, an unhappy David Martí would complain afterwards about supposed irregularities which included the manipulation and destruction of the remains, irregular decomposition, a lack of bones, and a poor quality DNA sample which had been sent to a lab in Barcelona which was not suitable. Among other things, Martí also claimed to have obtained a positive result from a handwriting examination which confirms that his grandmother was Grand Duchess Maria, crudely compared photographs to make his point, and believed that the DNA comparison between the murdered imperial children and Prince Philip had been falsified. One way or another, the grandson's statements were received very skeptically. Currently, the contender has almost no supporters, and it is here, at least for dignity's sake, that we shall close this particular chapter of the Romanov impostors. Thank you for watching this video. If you enjoy the content we produce here at Heart for History, please like and subscribe. And please feel free to leave a comment, as your feedback is greatly appreciated. Thanks again, and we'll see you again soon.